Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. I moved to Missoula in October, 3 months after my dad died. It wasn't something I planned, it just happened, the way everything seemed to happen after the accident. I wasn't making choices so much as drifting, carried by some dull current. Grief doesn't feel like sadness at first, it feels like fog, like being slightly removed from your own body. You go through motions, nodding in conversations, answering emails you don't remember opening, while a stranger wears your face. My dad had been my anchor after my mom passed 5 years earlier. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of man who fixed things instead of throwing them away. He called every Sunday without fail, no matter what. And then one night, a drunk driver ended him. A turn signal, a half second of misjudgment, and he was gone. Just like that. I packed my apartment in Portland without saying much. My friends asked if I was sure about leaving, and I just told them I needed somewhere quieter, somewhere to think and maybe focus on my editing projects. They didn't press. Grief is hard to question. Missoula had always been a dot on a map I'd saved from a road trip years ago. And when I saw a listing for Elk Creek residences, top floor unit available, 3rd story, affordable rent, pine trees wrapped around the lot, morning fog that settled like something from a dream, it felt, if not right, at least possible. I signed the lease, bought blackout curtains, and moved in with 2 suitcases and my laptop. The apartment itself was plain, beige walls, gray carpet, laminate in the kitchen. I softened it where I could. A warm lamp in the corner. The old throw blanket that used to live on my dad's recliner. A framed photo of us at Glacier, propped on the shelf. They became little anchors I could orbit around. I didn't go looking for friends. I didn't want them. I took editing jobs online that let me stay invisible. And for weeks the only real interaction I had was with a man named Jonas Kalin in Unit 204, right beneath mine. We met my first day when I was awkwardly trying to carry a box of books up the stairs. "Need a hand?" he called, leaning out of his doorway. I hesitated. "I'm good, thanks." He smiled, not offended, and shrugged. "All right, just thought I'd offer. I'm always listening anyway." The phrasing struck me, strange and deliberate, but I let it slide. Later he explained he worked from home, doing medical transcription. Long hours at a desk, headphones clamped on. A job that demanded stillness and attention. I understood that. For the first week, nothing happened, not a thing. The apartment was quiet, unremarkable, almost comforting in its emptiness. And then one night at exactly 3:12 a.m., I woke to a sound. Not loud, not even startling, just deliberate, scratching. I lay frozen in bed, heart stuttering, listening to it come from directly beneath me, the floorboards. It wasn't rats, it wasn't pipes. It was too steady, too controlled. Long, slow drags like fingernails or wire dragged across wood. I climbed out of bed, flipped the light on. The sound stopped instantly. Silence swallowed the room, broken only by the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. I stood there staring at the carpet, telling myself this was stress, that grief could make the mind misfire and the body twitch at shadows. I told myself that again the next night, and the next. But the sound always returned. Always at 3:12. Grief makes you doubt yourself. It makes you misplace words mid-sentence, lose minutes or hours like water slipping through your fingers. But this didn't feel like grief anymore. This wasn't random or accidental, because it wasn't 3:11, and it wasn't 3:13. Always it came at 3:12, a dragging motion beneath the bed like someone pacing in a circle. One long scrape, a pause, then another, and then silence. It was a rhythm that didn't belong to an accident. It was too intentional. One night, desperate to prove to myself it was nothing, I pressed my ear flat against the floor. I don't know what I thought I'd hear, maybe nothing at all, but instead I caught it. A breath, not mine, not pipes sighing through the walls, A single, human exhale just inches below me. I shot upright so fast my elbow slammed against the nightstand, knocking a book to the floor. My pulse was hammering. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I emailed the property management office. They replied with a cheerful, "We'll remind all residents about quiet hours. Let us know if it continues." The kind of response you give a college kid whining about late-night bass, not someone saying they heard breathing under their bed. I didn't press. I was too drained to push for answers I wasn't sure I wanted. A few nights later, piano music floated up through the floor. Faint but clear, soft chords, drawn out and haunting, melancholy enough to ache inside my chest. I froze in the middle of the room and just stood there listening. The piece lasted maybe 3 minutes, then silence again. The next afternoon I saw Jonas by the mailboxes. I tried to sound casual. "Hey, you play?" He looked up from his phone. "Play?" "The piano. I heard it yesterday." A faint smile. "Only when someone listens." I forced out a weak laugh, not knowing how else to respond. That night, I shoved a heavy chair against my bedroom door before crawling into bed. November came with heavy snow and longer nights. Missoula seemed to sink into itself, gray and muffled, the world moving slower, like it was in hibernation. I buried myself in work, editing manuscripts, sending invoices, staying busy enough to not think about Dad or the sounds from below. I started sleeping with podcasts in my ears. White noise, rain, thunderstorms. Anything to block out the silence. It helped. Some, until the note. I found it one morning, slipped under my front door. Thick paper, folded neatly. The handwriting was clean, deliberate. "You walked too quietly. I almost missed you tonight. Don't worry, I never sleep either." There was no name, no return address. But there was a faint scent clinging to the paper. Cologne. The exact same cologne I'd smelled on Jonas the day I moved in, the scent that sometimes lingered in the stairwell. I stood there trembling, gripping the note, weighing my choices. Knock on his door, scream, call the police, burn it. Instead, I reported it to the office. Their response was vague. "We'll check in with Unit 204. Nothing more. The following nights I barely slept. I locked the bedroom door, propped the chair against it, kept every light in the apartment burning. My nerves frayed until even the hum of the fridge startled me. I thought about breaking my lease, but some mix of pride, fear, and stubbornness pinned me there. Then the storm came. Mid-January, heavy snow crashed into the city. Around 2 in the morning, the power snapped out. The apartment drowned in darkness. I lit 3 candles and curled up on the couch, watching the battery on my phone inch downward. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the knock came. Not on the door, on the floor. 3 slow taps. I froze. My throat tightened. Then, muffled, but clear, came a whisper rising up from beneath the boards. "I know you're still awake." My hands shook as I grabbed my phone. I called the building supervisor, stammering until he agreed to come. 30 minutes later he arrived, hair wet with snow. Together we knocked on Jonas's door. No answer. "I want it opened," I said. My voice sounded ragged, foreign. He hesitated. "That's not protocol." But then he saw me, pale, shaking, eyes wide, and he relented. The key slid into the lock. Unit 204 was wrong. Not dirty, not cluttered. Just stripped, sterile, like a model home waiting to be staged. A twin bed, a single wooden chair, no piano, no warmth, no life. And the walls. They were covered with photographs. Of me. Dozens. Some taken from outside my window. Some from the hallway. One, God help me, from inside my apartment. The police were called immediately. What they uncovered was worse. A crawl space hidden beneath my bedroom floor, just wide enough for someone to lie inside. A thin foam mat, empty food wrappers, audio equipment, the kind used in hospitals to monitor heartbeats. Wires leading to a vent positioned directly under my bed. But Jonas was gone. No record of where he went. No bank activity. His phone disconnected like he'd dissolved into the air. That night they moved me out. The city assigned me a trauma counselor. I said yes, I had to. Still, sleep abandoned me. I checked under every bed, locked every door twice, flinched at every creak in the dark. Weeks passed. I tried to rebuild. I rented a small studio on the far side of town. Smaller, safer, mine. Then, one evening, a message appeared on my freelance editing account. No profile photo, no return email, just a single line. "Hi, Megan. Loved the way you read aloud that last essay. Your voice was trembling around 3:12, though. Sleep better tonight." I reported it. The platform promised to investigate. I don't believe they will. Here's what I've learned. When something feels wrong, it probably is. We're taught to be polite, to rationalize fear, to wait for proof, to second-guess the instinct that screams. But predators live in that space, between your doubt and your survival. Always trust the discomfort. Don't wait for danger to shake your hand. Listen to the knock. My name's Aaron Hale. I'm 32, recently divorced, 7.5 months sober, and renting a cramped 2-bedroom on the western edge of Flagstaff. The kind of apartment complex that looks like it was thrown together on a deadline, never finished, never loved. The stucco cracks in odd places like the building is trying to shed its own skin. In the hallway, a fluorescent tube hums with a sickly buzz that's probably been going since the Reagan years. You can hear everything through these walls. Sneezes, footsteps, fights muffled but still sharp enough to sting. The walls pretend at privacy, but they're paper thin. They can't hold anyone's life back. I came here after I lost custody of my daughter. That was the line I couldn't cross anymore. The day the judge said those words, I stopped drinking. I had to. I live here now to be closer to her, even if closer only means a couple of hours every other Sunday, walking slow circles around her school while some court monitor trails us with a clipboard. Work comes and goes. Substitute teaching, middle school English or science if I'm lucky. Kids who groan at Shakespeare and smirk when the frog's stomach splits open. When I'm not teaching, I read, I write. I keep journals now, one just for dreams, one for mantras, and another for the things I'll never tell anyone. Not even my sponsor. It's safer to put the dark stuff on paper, safer than letting it spin in my head. But sleep? Sleep's always been the problem. The silence at night grows loud, like it pushes in on me, and the thoughts rattle around too hard. Memories crawl out, the ones I'd rather bury. So I sit at the window. Unit 207, top floor, end of the building. From there, I can see most of the parking lot. Nights pass with me watching lights wink out across the complex. Some windows glowing soft yellow, others blue with TV flicker. There's comfort in it, almost a rhythm. Except for one. Unit 209. Its window never changes. Always a strange green-blue glow like the light inside a fish tank. No flickering, no shifting shadows. Just that eerie shade, dusk to dawn. It began the second week of January. I remember because it was the first snow that stuck since New Year's. I'd been up late grading 7th grade essays, the kind of writing that falls apart without autocorrect. Around 11, I heard a knock. Not loud, just polite. Hesitant. When I opened the door, a woman stood there. Mid-40s, maybe. Thin, sharp eyes, lips that looked caught between smiling and frowning, like she hadn't made up her mind which way to lean. Auburn hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, burgundy sweater, jeans, and in her hands, one bottle of wine and 2 glasses that didn't match. "Hi," she said. "I'm Danielle. 209. Thought I'd say hello." I held the knob like a shield. "Hey, nice to meet you." "You drink?" she asked, tilting the bottle. I hesitated, my mouth dry. "Not anymore." She cocked her head, unfazed. "You don't have to." I just thought maybe you'd want company. Sometimes this place feels like it wants to swallow quiet people. Something in her phrasing landed wrong. My chest tightened. Thanks. I'm okay, though. She nodded, like she'd already guessed that answer. Then she looked me dead in the eye and said, lightly but not joking, "Do you ever feel like people can hear your thoughts when you're alone too long?" I blinked. Not really. Her half-smile lingered, unreadable. Right. Maybe that's just me. Then she turned and walked back to her door. I stood there, staring as the strange glow from her apartment spilled across the carpet, tinting the hall. The next few nights, nothing happened. Nothing but that light, always on, always the same, sinking under my skin. I told myself it was a salt lamp or some kind of therapy bulb. Harmless. But then came the noise. At first it was faint, a low murmur, like distant voices bleeding through the walls. I figured she was on the phone, but the sounds didn't fit. They looped. The same fragments over and over. One voice always crying, another whispering, soft and desperate. Please, please, please. And once, only once, I swear I heard my name. Aaron. I froze, pressed my ear to the wall. Silence. I recorded it on my phone, played it back. Nothing but static, like the sound had hidden itself the second I tried to catch it. The next day I went to the leasing office, told them I was worried about noise at night. The guy at the desk barely looked up from his computer. "Danielle, she's quiet. You're probably hearing something from upstairs. Haven't had a single complaint." His voice was calm, dismissive, but that green-blue glow was already waiting for me back home. "Are you sure it wasn't what I wanted to say? There is no apartment above, we're on the top floor." But instead of arguing, I just nodded like an obedient tenant and left. That night when I came back, the hallway outside 209 smelled strange. Burnt lavender mixed with melted plastic. The glow leaking from her apartment was even stronger, almost radioactive, and it made my own unit feel dim and lifeless in comparison. By late February, the dreams started again. Nightmares I hadn't had since I quit drinking. My daughter, locked in windowless rooms, her little fists beating on doors I couldn't open. A TV screen showing nothing but looping home movies of her crying. No sound except her sobs. Sometimes I woke and swore her voice was still in my head, small and broken, asking me why I let her go. The light from 209 pushed through the blinds and spread across my ceiling like murky water, rippling in the corners of my vision. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. Around 8 p.m., I knocked on her door. My heart hammered in my throat like I was about to confront a ghost. Danielle answered almost immediately. She wore oversized black headphones draped around her neck, a loose cardigan slipping off one shoulder. Her eyes were rimmed red, but her smile looked as if I'd just interrupted something wonderful. "Hey," I said, forcing the words out. "Can I ask you something?" She slid the headphones off slowly, deliberately. "Sure." "What are you doing in there?" My voice cracked. "With the lights, the sounds. Are you recording something?" Her smile faltered, just for a second, but I saw it. "You shouldn't be out this late," she said, voice light but steady. "You never know what might follow you home." "I live here," I reminded her, suddenly defensive. Her eyes narrowed and she whispered, "That's the worst place to be." Then she shut the door. The nights that followed were worse. Scratching noises inside my walls, faint at first, like mice or a pipe shifting. Then knocking, repetitive, patterned. Tap tap, pause, tap tap tap, like code. One night, the sound jolted me right out of the shower. I ran dripping into the hallway, water pooling under my feet, only to find my front door standing wide open. No wind, no damage, just open. I panicked and ordered a motion camera off Amazon. I set it up in the living room facing the hallway. First night, nothing. Second night, I saw her. Danielle. Standing in my apartment at 2:17 a.m., perfectly still at the edge of the couch, her hands twitching, opening and closing like she was grasping invisible objects. She didn't move for nearly a full minute. Then, without a sound, she turned, walked out, and closed the door behind her. I drove straight to the police the next morning, shaking as I handed over the footage. Officers went to check her unit, but 209 was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no dishes, no lamps, just coils of wire strewn on the carpet, unplugged white noise machines, a broken pair of headphones, and a battered plastic bin filled with cassette tapes. The labels made my stomach turn. Tuesday. Aaron breathing. Aaron 2:13 a.m. Mirror wall thoughts. Sunday. When they played them back, the tapes were worse than I imagined. Not conversations, fragments, my voice, reading aloud, singing quietly, talking on the phone. Private sounds I never remembered making out loud. They'd found recording equipment hidden in the vents, some homemade, soldered together crudely to pick up vibrations in the walls. The police estimated she'd been gone at least 4 days. But my footage, her standing in my apartment, was from the night before. I didn't care about the discount the leasing office offered. I moved anyway, down to Unit 104, a smaller place, lower rent. I started sleeping again, but not well. My routine turned obsessive, checking the locks 3 times before bed, shoving towels into vents, moving as silently as possible, like if I erased every sound I could erase myself. It never worked. 2 weeks later, an envelope slid under my door. No return address. Inside, 1 unlabeled cassette tape and a single note, scrawled in jagged handwriting like it was written mid-run. I found another way in. I never needed the wall. 2-9. I didn't own a cassette player and I didn't try to find one. I wrapped the tape in plastic bags, wore gloves, and threw it deep into the dumpster. That night I dreamed of Danielle. She was crouched by the vent near my bed, face pressed against the metal, smiling as she whispered, "You sleep too loud, Aaron." Not all intrusions shatter glass or break locks. Some slide through routine, through trust, through silence. They find a home in your thoughts. And once the boundary between privacy and obsession collapses, it isn't about what they can hear anymore. It's about what they've already recorded. I never thought my mid-30s would look like this. Days passing without a real conversation, weeks folding into each other in silence. I always imagined I'd have someone beside me, maybe a family of my own, not this hollow kind of solitude. But life doesn't exactly bend to plans. My mother's death rewrote everything. She spent the last 20 years of her life in that old house, the same one I'd spent most of mine trying to escape. When she passed, the air there felt heavy with her absence, as though the walls themselves were still waiting for her footsteps. Grief didn't hit like a falling brick the way people write about it. It wasn't one big crash. It crept in the way dust does, quiet, persistent, settling into corners I didn't expect. It hid in the half-open drawer with her scarves still inside, in the hum of the answering machine that blinked with her last saved voicemail. Sometimes I'd play it just to hear her voice. Sometimes I'd hover my finger over delete and freeze. After the funeral, I stayed in Chicago longer than I should have. The city started to feel suffocating. Walking down streets lined with strangers' faces, hearing the unending grind of traffic, I felt like I was drowning in a current of noise. None of it was familiar. None of it was hers. Eventually, I packed my gear, loaded my car, and drove north. The Upper Peninsula had always called to me when I needed air, so I let the highway lead me there. Marquette isn't much on paper, but that was the draw. In summer, it hums softly with visitors, but come fall it quiets, and by November it feels like the whole town exhales and slips into hibernation. That kind of silence, that kind of distance was exactly what I wanted. I rented a 1-bedroom in a row of modest villas on Spruce Street. Riverbend Villas, Unit 11. It wasn't much, but it was clean, with a back porch that looked out over a ridge where the tree line caught the wind. On the other side of that ridge was Unit 10. Same porch, same layout, but its windows were always dark, the blinds always drawn. My work fit the place. Wildlife photography doesn't ask much from you socially. Just patience, an eye, and the willingness to wait. Most days it was me, my camera, and the company of deer slipping through the brush, foxes cutting low across the grass, the echo of wings overhead. Nights were spent hunched over my desk, editing, headphones humming with whatever playlist kept me awake. I told myself I didn't need anyone, and for a while, I believed it. Then came the storm. It was late August, the kind of night where thunder doesn't just rumble. It cracks open the sky and makes your ribs vibrate. I had just brewed tea, the lights low, when lightning flashed against the bluff. Instinct made me turn toward the window, mug halfway to my lips. And that's when I saw her. A woman, mid-40s maybe, thin face, pale in the wash of the storm. She was standing in the back window of Unit 10, not moving, just staring, directly at mine. Her eyes locked across the distance like they'd been waiting. The lightning stretched her features into sharp relief, every line of her face etched in that brief blaze of white. She wasn't some reflection. She was behind the glass, and she didn't blink. I froze, the tea cooling in my hand. Another flash, another glimpse, and she was gone. Just the dark window again, curtains still. I stood there longer than I'd admit, waiting for her to return, but the storm moved on, and the night went quiet. By morning, I tried to laugh it off. Told myself it was fatigue or maybe a trick of the light, the storm playing games with my nerves. God knows I'd been wrong before. But the next night, 1:38 a.m. exactly, there she was again. Same pale face, same window. And then the night after that, always at the same time, always with the same unnervingly blank expression. Not sadness, not anger, just presence. When I finally mentioned it to Harold, the property manager, he chuckled in that half-hearted way people do when they'd rather not talk about something. Unit 10? He said, scratching at his jaw. Nobody's in there. Hasn't been since April. Lady who lived there before. She kept to herself. Left one night without saying a word. Told me she thought she heard voices in the vents. His laugh died quick after that. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of her exactly, but because now I knew I wasn't just imagining it. By the end of September, the whispers began. Not loud, not sharp. Just soft threads of breath slipping through the vent above my bed, curling into the room when everything else was still. Always late, always broken into pieces. That's what the voices said at first. He's too quiet. We don't like the quiet ones. He hides behind animals because people scare him. Would he bury her in the woods too? They weren't just whispers anymore. They were sentences, thoughts, about me, about things I had never told anyone, things I barely admitted to myself. Every word slithered out of the vent above my bed like breathless confessions, too close, too knowing. I stopped sleeping with the window open. I unplugged everything in the apartment. Camera, laptop, toaster, anything with a plug. Didn't matter. The voices still came. Then, on a cold Monday morning in early October, I found something waiting for me on the porch table. A disposable camera. No note, no name. Just sitting there bone dry even though rain had hammered down all night. I stared at it for hours, afraid to touch it. I wanted to throw it away, but curiosity and dread have a way of working together. By noon I was at a photo shop downtown, hands sweating as I handed it over. 12 photos. All of me. One of me bent over the sink, shaving. Another of me making coffee, steam curling from the mug. A third of me curled on my side in bed, blanket half pulled up. My throat locked. But then there were others, ones that didn't make sense. Shots taken from inside my apartment, angles I couldn't explain. Looking out at my porch at my desk from behind my shoulder while I edited. One was from the hallway. The hallway only I had keys to. I went straight to the police. The officer was polite, detached, like he'd heard stranger stories. He took my statement, asked the standard questions, bagged the camera. They found nothing. No prints, no forced entry. Harold, the manager, swore again that Unit 10 was sealed, locked, untouched since spring. No keys unaccounted for. But every night after that, she was still there. 1:38 a.m. sharp, always in the window, her face pale and unreadable. I stopped turning on the lights, just sat in the dark, clutching my camera, pulse hammering, waiting for her to appear. It broke me one morning. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my jacket, walked across the ridge, and stood in front of Unit 10. I wasn't sure what I expected. Graffiti, empty beer cans, dust. But the door handle turned in my hand like it had been waiting. Inside, the air was freezing. Not fall cold, not drafty. Winter cold. The kind that gets inside your teeth and bones. The rooms were immaculate, no dishes, no mail, no clutter, just emptiness. Except the living room. A single wooden chair sat there, dead center, facing the window that looked directly into my unit. On the floor beside it, a neat stack of VHS tapes, each labeled in a shaky hand. Julian, first morning. Julian crying, Sep 14. Julian, night routine. Julian 1:38 a.m., lightning face. No TV, no VCR, nothing to play them on, just the tapes. And in front of the window, a tripod. An old analog camera mounted on top, its lens glassy and unblinking, pointed straight at my apartment. I didn't touch a thing. My chest was tight, legs weak, but I forced myself out, closed the door behind me, and walked straight to Harold's office. My voice shook as I told him what I'd seen. His face went pale, then blank, as if he was trying to wipe away whatever thought had just struck him. He swore again that Unit 10 was locked, swore no one had been in there. By that afternoon, he opened the door himself to prove it. Everything was gone. Chair, tapes, camera, nothing but bare walls and stale air. I packed that night. By dawn, I was gone. I told myself it was grief, trauma bending my mind, but I knew better. A month later, on a project near Traverse City, I checked into a roadside motel. I was exhausted, drained from shooting all day in the woods. I locked the door, pulled the blinds, let myself collapse into the stiff mattress. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe I was safe. Then my burner phone buzzed, the one I only used for maps. One message from an unknown number. Window looks good from this angle. Still prefer 1:38. My stomach dropped. I didn't reply. I didn't even think. The next morning, I hurled the phone out of my car window, left it in a ditch somewhere along the highway. And still, even now, I tape over every lens, every vent. Because the truth is simple. I never saw her blink. Not once. Sometimes the things we think are private aren't hidden at all. In a world that watches more than it listens, silence isn't safety. It's a beacon. And the quiet spaces we guard so carefully, they're more fragile than we ever realize. Long before I ever packed up and drove to Asheville, I used to lie awake at night wondering what starting over would actually feel like. Not the glossy Instagram version with fairy lights strung perfectly across a tiny kitchen, or a brand new set of hobbies and a spotless espresso machine waiting on a windowsill. No, I mean the real kind. The kind where you shove the last of your belongings and what's left of your dignity into the trunk of a used hatchback, sob through every highway exit sign on I-85, and land in a place where no one knows your name or the things you've endured. After I left Charlotte, and him, I kept telling myself I wasn't running. But the truth? I was sprinting, desperate for a finish line that probably didn't exist. The Maple Hollow apartments weren't much to look at, but Unit 1A had ivy crawling up the brick like veins, and hardwood floors that groaned underfoot as though they had stories of their own. The place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the damp, tired plaster walls. It was quiet. That was all I wanted. Quiet and a door with a lock that belonged only to me. Mr. Harold, The landlord was a wiry man in his 70s, with yellow-tinged glasses and a permanent squint that made you wonder if he saw more than he let on. He handed me my keys along with a thick stack of paperwork, his voice gruff but not unkind. Twice he reminded me about trash pickup days, as though forgetting them might undo the lease entirely. My upstairs neighbor, Daniel, appeared not long after I unloaded the last of my boxes. He was around my age, maybe a little older, soft-spoken with a voice that had a patient calm to it. He offered to carry my bookshelf upstairs, but chuckled when I declined. "First floor life," he said, grinning. "Lucky you." I forced a polite laugh. "Thanks, I guess. Just, if you hear me crying through the vent, do me a favor and mind your business." He smiled at that, but there was a flicker in his eyes I couldn't quite place. "Safe hours," he said lightly, almost under his breath. "Already memorized your schedule." I laughed, assuming sarcasm. I wanted to believe it was sarcasm. That first night I sat cross-legged on the floor, takeout container balanced on my lap, my cat Benny curled against my side, purring like a small engine. The boxes towered around me like walls I hadn't dismantled yet. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like someone's shadow was leaning over my shoulder. I didn't feel watched. I thought, this must be peace. But peace, I've learned, can be nothing more than a performance right before the stage collapses. Days settled into something like routine. I found a job at a local cafe, started scribbling poems again. They were rough, clumsy, but they were mine. Most nights I fell asleep to the faint hum of traffic and the muted thump of Daniel's footsteps above me. He was polite, neighborly, never intrusive. When I admitted I was struggling to sleep, he suggested a podcast. Oddly enough, it was the exact one I already listened to. "Small world," I said with a laugh. "Or maybe I just have good taste," he replied, his mouth smiling, though his eyes didn't quite match. A week later, I joked to him about craving peanut butter cups. The next morning, a pack appeared at my door. "You didn't hear me say that out loud," I said slowly. He tilted his head, smiling just enough to unsettle me. "Didn't I?" I told myself it was nothing, that trauma rewires your brain to see threat in every shadow. Kindness becomes suspicious. Timing feels like intrusion. I tried to let it go, bury myself in work, in healing, in anything that wasn't the growing suspicion of eyes on me. But then my backup charger vanished. A few days later, Benny's collar was gone. I assumed I'd misplaced them, until I found my journal lying open on a page I hadn't touched in weeks. I bought a cheap indoor camera, aimed it at the entryway, and told no one. The next day, the battery was drained, dead without explanation. I didn't sleep well that week, and when I finally managed to lock myself out of the apartment, standing there with no keys, no plan, and a sick twist in my gut, I felt like the biggest fool alive. I was standing barefoot on the front step, socks damp against the concrete, juggling a bag of groceries and muttering curses at myself, when Daniel appeared behind me like he'd been waiting for that exact moment. "Forgot your spare?" he asked casually, like it was the most ordinary question in the world. I blinked at him, caught off guard. "What spare?" He smiled faintly and held up a key between two fingers. "My spare key, the one I kept under the microwave in my apartment. You left it sticking in the laundry room door a few weeks ago. Figured I'd keep it safe for you, just in case." I stared at the key, my stomach lurching, but my face remembered to perform gratitude. With numb fingers, I took it from him, forcing out a brittle smile. "Thanks," I said softly, voice thin. That night, I installed a chain lock. I shoved a chair under the handle too, the way you do in cheap motels when you don't trust the walls to keep anything out. My pulse refused to settle, and Benny was restless too. He kept staring at the ceiling like something up there had his attention. The pacing began 2 nights later. I could hear him through the floorboards, heavy, deliberate steps, back and forth. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., still pacing. My nerves frayed with every thud. I texted Mr. Harold, asking if any other units were available, explaining I wanted to move. He never responded. The next morning, there was a sticky note on my door. The handwriting was neat. Careful. Leaving already? You were doing so well this time. I liked watching you start over. My chest tightened. I called the police. They came, searched the apartment. Nothing missing. No forced entry. The note didn't have usable prints. Could be a prank, one officer said with a shrug. We'll keep a report on file, but there's nothing actionable. Nothing actionable. The words echoed like a cruel joke. That night I left every light burning. I woke before the sound, before anything even happened. My body knew before my mind caught up. The air was cold, wrong, weighted. Benny wasn't curled on the bed. My eyes darted around the room, heart hammering. That's when I saw it. The bathroom mirror was fogged as if someone had just stepped out of a hot shower. My camera was off again. I stumbled into the hallway. Benny was wedged under the kitchen counter, trembling. My hands shook as I dialed my brother. My voice came out in a whisper. I think someone's been in here. He didn't pause. Get out now. Don't wait. Grab your bag and go. I threw clothes and essentials into a tote, snatched my keys, and sprinted for the door. The chain lock lay on the floor, cut clean. I froze, breath locked in my chest. Someone had been inside. Not just once. While I slept. While I dreamed about peace, about poems, about peanut butter cups. Someone stood in the dark and watched me. I didn't think. I ran. My aunt helped me break the lease and I moved to Nashville where she lived. I found work in another cafe. I signed up for therapy. I started unpacking in new ways, learning that trust is a muscle. It weakens, it withers, but it can grow again, though slowly, painfully. Still, sometimes I flinch when I hear footsteps overhead. Sometimes I press my ear to the wall, waiting for something I can't name. 2 weeks after the move, the voicemails began. No number, no voice. Just footsteps. Slow, steady, the sound of pacing on old hardwood floors. I don't answer them anymore. Because sometimes danger doesn't kick down your door. Sometimes it smiles from the hallway, learns your favorite podcast, remembers your cravings, holds on to your spare key just in case. We teach ourselves to swallow our instincts, to be polite, to seem sane. But the truth is brutally simple. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Trust your gut. It might be the only thing that saves you from the thing upstairs. After the divorce, I didn't take much. A few shirts, jeans, the stack of books I couldn't part with, the framed photo of Elise from last Christmas, her face lit up under the tree lights, and the espresso machine my ex never touched, but insisted on keeping on the counter like some kind of stage piece. Everything else I left behind in the house that was now hers. Empty walls, hollowed rooms. Like the place had exhaled me and sealed the air behind her. By early March, I'd signed the lease for Unit 2C in Ashford Terrace, a squat condo complex in Syracuse where winter still clung stubbornly to the streets. Ice on gutters, gray skies pressing down, and the whole place carrying the same energy as a retirement brochure stripped of its smiles. The siding was faded, the walls paper-thin, and the neighbors shuffled by with that slow, heavy gait of people who had already seen enough. They'd nod sometimes, but no one cared if you answered. I told myself it was fine. I didn't need neighbors or small talk. I needed space. Distance from my ex, from Elise, and from the version of myself that had dissolved inside that old house. My unit sat directly above 1D. When I first moved in, it looked abandoned. Blinds drawn tight, mailbox collecting dust. 2 weeks later, that changed. I noticed a dim yellow light flickering on at odd hours, like a tired lamp refusing to give up. Then I saw her, a woman standing at her window, never moving, always facing the courtyard. her silhouette pressed against the glass like she was watching something no one else could see. We didn't meet until I accidentally dropped the wrong mail into her slot. Common mistake in a building like that. I knocked, light, not wanting to bother anyone. The door opened almost immediately, like she'd been standing there waiting. She was pale, neat, maybe mid to late 30s, straight brown hair tucked neatly behind her ears. Her smile flickered across her face but stopped just shy of her eyes. "You must be the one with the slow steps," she said. I froze, caught off guard. "Sorry?" "You walk like you're thinking about where you've been." Her tone was light, observational, like she was noting the weather. "That's nice, I guess," I muttered, fumbling the envelopes toward her. She took them gently, whispered, "Thank you," and closed the door with the same soft precision she'd opened it. The name on her mailbox read, Ms. Lane. I never once saw her leave. It began quietly. A photo of Elise, one I kept framed on my nightstand, was missing. I found the frame intact, undisturbed, but the picture gone. Days later, it reappeared on the floor outside my unit, torn across the middle, face down on the mat. Tucked behind it was the old ticket stub Elise had given me when she was 9. Then the note started. Post-its slipped under my door, written in hurried scrawl. "It's sad to hear people cry through the vents." Same line twice, once in blue ink, once in pencil, like reminders from a stranger cataloging my weakness. Sleep unraveled. I blamed it on stress, on the divorce, the hollow ache of guilt. I buried myself in longer hours at the school. I scrolled endlessly through online shops without ever hitting buy. Phone calls with Elise became shorter, colder, her voice hardening into something that echoed her mother's. I started showering at the gym, left the bedroom TV on through the night just for the company of noise. Told myself I was paranoid, fragile, dramatic. But some quiet part of me, the part I couldn't reason with, kept whispering that the walls of this place weren't right. One morning, just after 4 a.m., I woke to the sound of something dragging in the hall. I cracked my door open. Ms. Lane was kneeling on the carpet, pulling a large black garbage bag across the hallway floor. Her left hand was wrapped in a blood-stained bandage, fresh red seeping through the gauze. She looked up at me, her eyes calm, her face pale, and gave a thin smile. "Sorry," she said. "It's just old things. I'm finally throwing out old things." Her voice was light, like she was explaining a trip to the grocery store. I closed the door before I could ask what was in the bag. The next day, I bought a doorbell cam, one of those models that sends you a push notification whenever there's motion. I wanted proof, or at least reassurance. But nothing came. No alerts, no movement, no strangers at the door. Just silence. So I started writing everything down. Dates, times, the noises I thought I heard, the shapes I imagined I saw, like cataloging shadows. It helped a little. One afternoon, I spotted her again. Ms. Lane was standing in the courtyard in the drizzle. No coat, no umbrella, her hair plastered to her cheeks. She just stood there in the wet grass, staring up at my unit. Her face was blank, almost empty, like she wasn't looking at me but straight through me, past me, into some place only she could see. In June, a transformer blew near the back entrance. The whole complex went dark for 4 hours. I lit candles, drank coffee cold from the fridge, told myself it was no big deal. But the next morning, something was wrong. Not obvious. Not at first. The bedroom felt heavy, the air thick, like it had been breathed in by someone else. The sheets weren't just rumpled, they were shifted, tugged at, the way someone might pull them halfway straight and then stop. On the nightstand was a glass of water, clear, cold, condensation still clinging to the sides. I don't sleepwalk, I don't drink water at night, and I don't own that kind of glass. Just past the threshold of my room, pressed into the hardwood, were 2 damp footprints. Bare, small, delicate, like they belonged to someone who wanted to be quiet but didn't care if I found out later. The police came. I asked them to search her unit, to just look. They shook their heads. No cause, no warrant. "She's not home anyway," one officer muttered. They left me standing there, more unsettled than before. I checked into a Motel 6 off the highway for a week. Thin blankets, buzzing neon sign outside, but at least I could sleep without wondering who might be standing in the next room. When I returned, nothing had changed. The lights in Ms. Lane's unit still glowed pale. Nobody said anything about where I'd gone. Mr. Alberti from 3B gave me his usual nod like I'd never left. My mailbox was stuffed. I sorted through it absent-mindedly, coupons, a catalog, the electric bill, when a single folded sheet slipped out. No envelope, no stamp, just careful cursive on white paper, tight and deliberate, like someone practicing how to look normal. "I can still hear you breathing even when you're quiet. I like the version of you that sleeps. You're safest when you're asleep." I didn't pack like someone preparing to move. I packed like someone fleeing. By midnight I was gone. No forwarding address, no polite goodbyes. Just the hum of the highway beneath my tires and a tight, burning ache in my throat. The same ache I'd felt on Elise's last birthday when she refused to blow out the candles with me there. I live in Rochester now with my cousin. It's nothing special. Longer commute, noisy street. But the nights are quieter in my head. I reach out to Elise more, slowly, carefully, like we're building a bridge over charred ground. Hearing her voice still makes my chest hurt, but pain, at least, means there's something alive. Last month I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. No subject, no text, just one attachment, a video. My heart stalled when I opened it. The angle was low, fixed. The grainy shot came from the floor vent by my bed. I was sleeping, mouth slightly open, sheets rising and falling. The camera caught every breath. When we lose everything, family, routines, the version of ourselves we thought was permanent, we look for stability in the wrong places. We excuse the strange, ignore the red flags, rationalize the terrifying just to feel grounded. But trust isn't just about other people. It's about yourself. About listening to your own instincts, your own discomfort, your own fear. Because the truth is, the scariest monsters don't always break in. Sometimes they've been watching from below the whole time. If you'd asked me at 15 where I thought I'd be a year later, Red Fern, Pennsylvania wouldn't have even cracked the list. Maybe not dead last. Prison would have been worse. But Red Fern was close enough. After the trial, after the reporters, after the endless fallout with my stepfather, all my mom wanted was to vanish. She said it with a kind of brittle determination, like running far enough could scrub our lives clean. So we did. We packed the car with whatever fit, left Florida behind, and drove until the air stopped smelling like salt and damp heat. No more Gulf humidity, no more sirens at 2 a.m, no more whispered fights bleeding through the walls. Just us, 2 suitcases, a dented Honda Civic, and a silence so thick it pressed against the windows. Red Fern was the kind of small town that felt like it barely wanted to exist. A whisper tucked into the Allegheny woods, a diner that looked like it hadn't changed its menu since 1964, a grocery store where the produce always seemed bruised, a population frozen in time, like the same families had been recycling themselves for decades. Our rental house was old, in that weary way wood can be old. The stairs groaned with every step as though they resented our weight. The wallpaper peeled at the corners, curling inward like it wanted to escape. But the rent was cheap, and the neighbors waved from their porches. That was enough for my mom. The Callaways lived across the street. At first they looked perfect, so perfect it felt staged, like they'd been pulled from some glossy vintage advertisement. 4 kids, stair-stepped in age from maybe 6 to 13, each one blonde, dressed in pressed clothes, hair brushed to a shine. Mrs. Callaway wore dresses with collars and pearls, even when she was out pruning roses in the yard. Mr. Callaway never wore jeans, always slacks, always a smile, too wide, too neat, lips never parting enough to show teeth. They brought us pumpkin bread the first week, still warm, wrapped in wax paper, Invited us to their church too. Such a friendly community, Mrs. Calloway said, her voice sweet and practiced. My mom smiled tightly, accepted the bread and said, "Thank you, that's kind." But when the door closed, she muttered, "Nice people. Bit Stepford, though." She'd grown up Catholic but had stopped praying long before I was born. I kept watching the Calloways, the kids especially. They didn't play outside, didn't shout, didn't bicker. When they walked to the bus stop, they lined up perfectly. Shoulders squared, eyes down, mouth sealed. Not even the littlest one ever whined. It was like they were trying to erase their presence, or maybe like someone had already erased it for them, and for a while I tried not to think about it. 2 weeks later, Mrs. Calloway knocked on our door again, her smile sharp enough to slice glass. "Just a simple meal, nothing fancy. We'd love to have you," she said. I didn't want to go. My mom didn't either. But she sighed, smoothed her hair, and said, "We can't turn them down twice. People talk." So, we went. Their house smelled wrong, clean, yes, waxed floors, soap, but layered with something cloying underneath, something too sweet, like fruit that's been left on the counter too long. The dining room was dim, lit only by candles, even though daylight still pressed against the curtains. Each place setting was arranged with mathematical precision, silverware polished until it gleamed. Before dinner, the children lowered their heads and recited grace in perfect unison. The words were flat, practiced. Their voices didn't rise or fall, just droned, mechanical. It went on for minutes, longer than any prayer I'd ever heard. I counted blinks. None of them did. The food was meatloaf, plain, warm, tasteless. I chewed and swallowed, and every bite seemed heavier than the last. Halfway through, the youngest boy, Caleb, dropped his fork. It clattered against the plate, sharp in the stillness. He started whispering, fast, his voice low and strange. Not English. The sounds curled like something old, guttural, maybe Latin. I couldn't place it. His eyes rolled back, leaving only the whites. His body went rigid, small hands trembling against the table. My mom's fork slipped from her hand. She sucked in a sharp breath, reached under the table, and gripped my wrist. Her smile was frozen, brittle. "Time to go," she murmured, voice so low I almost didn't hear it. Then louder to the Calloways, "Ellie just remembered she has a project for school." Mrs. Calloway's smile didn't falter. She didn't even glance at Caleb, who was still whispering, stiff as a board. We excused ourselves as politely as we could. When we got home, my mom locked her bedroom door for the first time since we'd moved in. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, straining to hear anything. Crickets, wind, cars on the road. But there was nothing. No sound at all, like the Calloway house had swallowed the whole night. Things got stranger after that dinner. On Sunday mornings, like clockwork, the entire Calloway family circled their house. 7 times, never more, never less. Always clockwise, always barefoot, their pale feet padding silently against the frostbitten grass. Mr. Calloway walked in front, clutching a thick black book that seemed older than the town itself. Sometimes he shouted words I couldn't make out, his voice sharp and trembling like it was splitting in two. Other times, he sobbed openly, body heaving as he marched. Once I saw him shirtless in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt, striking his back with a leather strap until welts bloomed raw and red. His lips moved fast, whispering through clenched teeth, the words harsh and broken. The Bible lay open in front of him, its cover scorched as if it had been pressed against fire. My mom saw him from the kitchen window one afternoon. She slid the back door open and stepped onto the porch. "Excuse me, Mr. Calloway?" she called, her voice tight, careful. "Maybe you could not do that where the kids can see?" He turned slowly, streaks of blood across his back. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost tender, like he was explaining something to a child. "Pain cleanses the vessel." Then he smiled faintly and handed her a tract, the words printed bold across the front. "Pain cleanses the vessel." She threw it straight into the trash. The Callaway kids remained silent, distant shadows. At school, they were polite but hollow. No laughter, no questions, no clubs, no sports. Their eyes had a strange stillness, wide and unblinking, like they were waiting for something they couldn't explain. The oldest, Leah, was in one of my classes. She never spoke, not once, not even to answer a roll call. One night I couldn't sleep. I sat up reading with my lamp on when I noticed the porch light flicker across the street. I parted the blinds just a little. Mr. Callaway stood in his yard, completely still, his face turned directly toward our house. He didn't move for minutes. I dropped the blinds and sat frozen, heart pounding so loud I swore he could hear it. Sleep didn't come easy after that. It was late October when Martha, the third Callaway child, appeared on our porch. I'll never forget it. Cold enough for frost, her breath fogging the air, and she stood there barefoot, skin pale, lips blue. She didn't knock, didn't say a word, just stood. My mom opened the door and gasped, "Honey, where's your coat? Are you okay?" Martha's expression never changed. She simply held out a folded note with trembling fingers, then turned and walked back across the street, her steps slow, deliberate. I unfolded the paper. 4 words scrawled in a shaky hand. "Don't drink the water." My mom read it, and the color drained from her face. The next morning, she called CPS. 2 women came with clipboards. They walked through the Callaway house, asked questions, made notes. When they came back out, one of them shrugged. "The kids are clean, fed, enrolled in school. No bruises, no signs of abuse. Some families are just religious. It's not illegal to pray. But the children," my mom started, voice sharp, "they're safe." The woman cut her off gently. "There's no cause for further action." That was it. But after that, my mom bought bottled water every week. She never used the tap again, and neither did I. We didn't talk about it, not once. Then, just before Thanksgiving, the Callaways vanished. No warning, no goodbye. One morning, their door stood open, wind rattling the screen. The house was stripped clean, furniture gone, closets empty, Bibles stacked neatly in the kitchen, as if waiting for someone to find them. Even the roses in their yard had been ripped out, roots and all. They were gone. A year later, a new family moved in. A young couple with a toddler and a German shepherd that barked at everything. They were loud, messy, normal in the best way. One afternoon, the woman waved my mom over, smiling nervously. "Did you know there were locks on the outside of all the bedroom doors?" she asked, half laughing. Like they were keeping someone in. My mom froze. Her face went pale. "No," she said softly. "We didn't know. We never told her about the dinners, or the marching, or the note. I still live in Red Fern. My mom doesn't. She moved away the moment I left for college. But sometimes when I drive past Briar Street late at night, I swear I hear something drifting from that empty house. A low, steady murmur, chanting, faint but insistent, like footsteps circling in the dark. Not every nightmare comes with blood or screaming. Some wear ironed shirts and hand you warm bread. Evil isn't always loud. It's patient. It hides behind neat curtains and quiet children. The families who look perfect from the outside, sometimes those are the ones you should fear most. Listen to children. Trust the unease in your gut. And never ignore a warning, no matter how small it seems. When the fire happened, the idea of safety vanished for me. It wasn't just gone. It was ripped away, burned out of existence like everything else that night. Afterward, nothing felt real anymore. School became a blur of voices I couldn't focus on. Home wasn't home, and even sleep felt like falling into a pit I didn't want to climb out of. My little brother Aaron never even made it to the fire truck's sirens. He was gone before the firefighters reached our street. I can still feel the sidewalk under my bare feet, gritty and cold, while my mom and I stood there, our skin raw from the smoke. We didn't cry at first. We just watched in silence as the house, the place where Aaron's laughter had bounced off the walls, where birthdays and Christmases stacked themselves in corners, buckled and burned. Later, when the shock broke open into grief, my mom told me through clenched fists and shaking breaths that we couldn't stay. "We'll start over," she said, her eyes swollen, voice torn. Far away, somewhere no one knows us, no one whispers. So we left Phoenix behind, every street, every memory, and drove until the desert gave way to fog, until the nights grew sharp enough that our breath came out like smoke. That's how we ended up in Elm Valley, a place you didn't stumble into unless you'd already lost your way. It was gray in a way the desert never was, the air heavy with damp earth and pine needles that clung to your clothes. Our new house sat at the end of a small cul-de-sac with just 5 homes and a single flickering streetlight. The walls were thin enough that you could hear every cough, every creak, every late-night TV from the neighbors. And right beyond our backyard stood the greenhouse. It leaned crookedly, like it was bowing under the weight of time, tucked at the edge of the lot next door. The glass panes were clouded with streaks, a few cracked like old bones, and thick vines coiled around its frame as if they were trying to drag it underground. But what struck me most wasn't the decay, it was the glow. A pale greenish-yellow light pulsed from within, faint but steady, like a heartbeat caught under glass. The greenhouse belonged to Mr. Denton, our neighbor. He lived alone in a weathered brown house right beside ours, bald, heavy-set, always in the same oversized coveralls. His mouth barely ever moved into a smile, and when it did, it never reached his teeth. He wore rubber gloves constantly, outside, in town, even once when I saw him at the grocery store, as if the world itself was too filthy for him to touch. He never really spoke to me, just nodded when we crossed paths. Sometimes he'd stare a little longer than people normally do, long enough to make the air feel tight. Once I asked my mom why his car never seemed to go anywhere, why the same muddy tire tracks showed up outside his driveway like a repeating pattern. She gave me that dismissive smile that parents use when they're tired. "Some people just like quiet lives," she said. But the quiet around him didn't feel natural. It felt constructed, arranged like furniture in a room no one lived in. Then the disturbances started. First, my phone. Calls came late at night, no caller ID, just a soft static at first, but underneath it was something, a buzzing, insect-like, as if bugs were trapped and struggling against plastic. I'd hang up, but it would call back again. Then came the windows. My bedroom window was always locked before I slept, but I'd wake to freezing air cutting across my face. The latch undone. On the sill, muddy prints, small ones pressed in as if someone had been standing there in wet boots watching. I tried to tell myself it was trauma, that losing Aaron and the fire had left me cracked, and my brain was filling in the dark with things that weren't there. Shadows twitching when they were really still, sounds that weren't sounds. My therapist had warned me about that, how grief can twist your senses. But then the soccer ball changed everything. One afternoon I kicked it too hard and watched it sail over our fence into Mr. Denton's yard. The ball disappeared into the grass behind the greenhouse. I didn't want to ask him for it. Just the thought of knocking on his door made me feel like I was crossing some unspoken boundary. So instead, I slipped around the side yard, moving slowly, quietly, like the silence itself would scold me if I broke it. His yard was unnatural in its stillness. The air was damp, thick with a smell that made me want to swallow instead of breathe. Even the insects seemed to avoid it. No buzzing, no chirping. Just the faint groan of the greenhouse door, cracked slightly open. A gust of air hit me as I approached, wet, earthy, with a coppery tang underneath. The kind of smell you can't place at first, but your stomach knows before your brain does. Against every rational thought, I leaned closer and peered through the gap. Inside, it wasn't rows of plants like I expected. No tomatoes, no herbs, no soil trays. The shelves were lined with jars. Dozens, maybe hundreds, stacked neatly, each one catching the faint green glow. Some glass was cloudy with age, others were spotless, freshly wiped. And on each jar was a label, not the names of plants, not dates, not scientific notes. They were human names. Ava, Tyler, Kay. Some were reduced to just initials, all written with meticulous, surgical neatness. And inside the jars were scraps. Some jars held tangled clumps of hair, matted and gray like they'd been cut away decades ago. Others contained yellowed fingernails, curled slightly, pressed against the glass like they wanted out. One jar had a molar floating in cloudy liquid, the root still intact, jagged like it had been ripped straight from a jaw. My stomach turned. I didn't force myself to look at more. My body decided for me, feet moving before my mind caught up. I bolted, leaving the soccer ball to rot in the grass. That night I told my mom everything, every detail from the smell to the names on the jars. I expected her to look horrified, to grab me and shake the truth out of me. Instead, she rubbed her forehead and let out this tired sigh, like she'd already known something was coming. "Jonah," she said softly, her voice heavy with the kind of patience adults save for children they think are fragile. "You've been through something unimaginable. You're still healing. Sometimes our brains, they play tricks on us when we're hurt. It's okay. But we can't go accusing neighbors of things we don't understand." Her words stung. I nodded anyway, pretending to agree because arguing would only make her think I was unraveling faster. But I didn't sleep a second that night. A week later, Mr. Denton came to our door. I hovered in the hallway while Mom opened it. He stood there with a wicker basket cradled in his gloved hands. Inside were vegetables, plump tomatoes, leafy greens, and pale carrots so white they looked wrong, their roots still caked with soil. "I thought you might enjoy the harvest," he said, his voice dry, measured, as if he'd rehearsed the line. Mom smiled politely. "That's very kind of you, thank you." I stared at the basket from behind her shoulder. Something in me refused to touch any of it. That night after she'd gone to bed, I dragged the whole basket out behind our lot. I buried it in the woods, deep enough that no one would ever find it. The next morning, the glow from the greenhouse was different, no longer soft or green. It burned red, sharp, angry, alive. The dreams began soon after, always the same. Aaron, standing outside the greenhouse, his face pale, his eyes fixed on our house. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just raised one arm slowly and pointed toward the forest. Over and over. I'd wake drenched in sweat, heart rattling against my ribs, his image branded behind my eyes. Eventually I told Casey, the only person at school who didn't make me feel like I was drowning. She didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She leaned in, serious. "Let's fly my brother's drone over. He won't miss it." That Friday, after Mr. Denton left in a neighbor's pickup truck, we launched the drone. Its buzzing filled the air, a nervous hum that made the silence feel even heavier. We steered it over his lot, circling the greenhouse. Later, when we replayed the footage, it didn't make sense. The inside of the greenhouse warped as the drone's camera tilted, bending like heat haze. Something moved in there, something long, angles bending in ways a body shouldn't. It shifted like time-lapse footage sped up and reversed, stuttering in and out of the frame. Then, for one breathless second, it felt like the figure looked straight at the lens. The screen froze. Static. Signal lost. The drone never came back. 2 days later, Casey stopped showing up at school. I biked to her house. Her mom opened the door, red-eyed, her smile pulled too tight. "She's at her aunt's," she said quickly. But Casey's backpack was sitting by the couch. Her dog barked frantically from down the hall, and her bedroom window upstairs was open, too wide. That night, from my window, I saw them, 2 silhouettes moving inside the greenhouse. One tall, one smaller. Her size. By morning, Mr. Denton's house was silent. A crooked for sale sign leaned in his yard. Just like that, he was gone. The greenhouse door was shut, its light dead. The new owners moved in mid-August. By September, they tore the greenhouse down. I watched from my bedroom window, unable to look away. When the crew found the trap door beneath the gravel, the foreman froze, face pale. Cops came. Trucks followed. No one told us what they found. But the buzzing never left. At night, sometimes faint, sometimes sharp, it hums in my ears like a reminder. And Aaron still comes to me in dreams. But now he isn't standing at the greenhouse. He's standing right behind me. His mouth moves, trying to whisper something I can't hear, or maybe I'm too afraid to. Some wounds don't heal just because you run. Some truths wait, buried, feeding in the dark, and ignoring them doesn't erase them. It makes them grow. People think quiet means peace. They don't tell you it can press in on you heavy as wet blankets until you can't breathe. I was 19 when I moved into Green Pines Estate, a place you wouldn't even glance at twice from the road. 3 crumbling concrete buildings clung to a patch of scorched dirt outside Redding, California, like they were ashamed to still be standing. That summer felt like the sun was trying to burn the world down, trees sagging, air so hot it shimmered, the ground radiating heat like a stove coil left on too long. My sister Anna found the listing. "It's cheap," she said over the phone, her voice tired but practical. I didn't argue. Cheap mattered. Space mattered more. I needed somewhere that didn't feel like campuses stuffed with chatter or the antiseptic white walls of ERs where I'd sat too often, shaking in bathroom stalls while panic attacks folded me in half. Somewhere I didn't have to meet the pity or irritation in people's eyes. Anna worked mornings at a dentist's office, always out the door by 6. I worked nights at a gas station where the fluorescents hummed louder than customers, and the customers were usually tweaking. Our schedules passed each other like trains in the dark. She had the master bedroom. I took the small one down the hall. It worked. At first anyway. Those first few nights I thought maybe I'd finally struck some kind of balance. I'd get home just after 1, take a quick shower, heat up leftover noodles, then scroll my phone until the meds made my thoughts slow down. It was ordinary, simple, manageable. Then 2 a.m. came. The first night, it was faint. A dragging sound, slow, steady, like someone pulling heavy furniture across tile. The rhythm set my nerves on edge. I froze, held my breath, straining to make sure it wasn't my imagination. Then silence. I let it go until the next night when it came again. The unit below us was supposed to be vacant. "Probably pipes," Anna mumbled the next morning, sipping coffee while still half asleep. "Or raccoons. This place is old." But we didn't share pipes with the other units, and raccoons don't shove couches around. So I asked Mr. Ladd, the building manager, a leathery guy who looked like he lived off cigarettes and bologna sandwiches. He didn't even glance up from his clipboard. "Echo from the vents," he muttered. "Sound bounces weird here, you'll get used to it." I wanted to believe him. I told myself I did. But the sounds kept coming. Some nights it was the dragging. Others it was footsteps, slow, deliberate, pacing back and forth beneath my bed like someone couldn't settle down. Hours of it. One night, I swear I heard crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just a faint, wet sound, like someone muffling their sobs into their hands. I shoved a pillow against my ears, turned the fan higher, and told myself I was exhausted, imagining it. But then the cat changed everything. Charcoal had been ours for a year. Lazy, affectionate, a fat gray shadow that followed us from room to room. He'd never hissed at anything in his life. One night I came home and found him crouched low, clawing and snarling at the vent in the hallway like he'd cornered something alive. His ears were flat, tail puffed out, back arched. "Hey, buddy." I crouched beside him, my chest tightening. That's when I heard it. Coming from the vent. Faint, Too faint but real. Whispering. Two voices, one deep, one higher, weaving together. I pressed my ear to the grate, heart hammering. The words were blurred, like they were speaking through water. Without thinking, I tapped the vent once. Soft. The whispering cut off instantly. Charcoal bolted down the hall, tail like a bottle brush. I sat there frozen, palms sweating, waiting for something else. Nothing. Just silence. I poured myself a drink in the kitchen, my hands trembling so bad the bottle rattled against the glass. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the hallway smelled burnt. Not toast, not food, sharper. Singed hair, chemicals. It caught in my throat. Someone downstairs probably left a pan on, Anna said when I asked, shrugging like it was nothing. I didn't bother reminding her no one lived below us. A week later, I started recording at night. I know how it sounds, paranoid, obsessive. Maybe I was. But I needed proof. Needed to know if it was in my head or not. I left my phone on the nightstand, recording app running while I tried to sleep. Most of the time, it caught nothing but static, or the occasional creak of the old building settling. But one night at exactly 3:07 a.m., the recording picked up something new. Not the usual static or creaks. This time it was footsteps. Heavy, uneven. The kind of gait that makes you imagine someone dragging one leg behind them. Then came a laugh. Short, wet, choked, like someone trying to laugh while drowning. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone clutched in both hands, listening again and again. I played it for Anna at breakfast, shoving the phone toward her across the table. She barely looked up from buttering toast. You probably left a video running, or one of those TikToks autoplayed. You've been scaring yourself lately. Did you skip your meds? I didn't leave anything on, I said. My voice cracked in a way that made her frown. I wanted to believe her version, but I knew she was wrong. 2 nights later, it escalated. The AC kicked on, rattling the ceiling fan as usual. I was scrolling Instagram trying to ignore the weight of being awake at 2 a.m. Then, bang! Something slammed against the vent in my wall so hard the frame shook. I jolted upright, heart pounding so fast my hands went numb. Anna was asleep in the next room. Charcoal was under the bed, hiding, eyes wide. I didn't dare go near the vent. But the night wasn't done with me. Anna's voice cut through the silence, shaky. Come here. I walked into the living room and found her standing behind the couch, holding a bundled towel at arm's length. She unwrapped it just enough for me to see what she'd found. It looked like a doll. Or what had once been a doll. Melted, warped, blackened. Its arms fused to its body, its face twisted into a half expression that wasn't quite human. Burnt plastic clung to its scalp like hair. Charcoal growled low in his throat and bolted from the room. It was shoved back there, Anna said quickly, defensive, as if I might accuse her of planting it. Probably from the last tenants. Toys get lost behind furniture all the time. I shook my head. No. I helped you move in. This place was spotless. She didn't argue. Instead, she called Mr. Ladd. He arrived 15 minutes later, smelling of sweat and stale coffee, his shirt clinging to him. He glanced once at the doll, face tightening. You two been messing around in the basement storage? No, Anna said flatly. He nodded, muttered something under his breath, and left without another word. Didn't take the thing, didn't explain. Stopped answering our texts after that. The following weekend I stayed awake past 3, too hot to sleep anyway. At 3:12 I felt it, a vibration, faint but deliberate, pulsing up through the floor beneath me. I turned off my fan, slipped my headphones down, waited. Then it came. 5 knocks. Slow, measured, directly beneath my bed. I stared at the ceiling, frozen. Another 5 followed. I don't know what possessed me, but I knocked back, 5 taps of my knuckles against the floorboards. Silence stretched. Then a voice. Not from the vent this time, from the floor itself, carried up through the wood. A whisper, low and urgent. Don't answer the door. My chest locked tight. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. A second later, 3 hard knocks rattled our apartment door. Confident, insistent. Not the kind of knock that waits for permission. Every nerve in my body screamed, but I walked into the hallway anyway, looked through the peephole. Nothing. Anna slept on, oblivious. I stood there for 5 long minutes before finally sliding the chain across and stumbling back to my room. The next morning, claw marks covered the inside of our front door. 4 deep grooves etched into the wood, jagged and uneven, like fingers, or something worse. Later that day, in the laundry room, I worked up the courage to ask one of the older tenants about the unit below ours. She gave me a long, pitying look. "Honey, that place has been sealed for years. 10, maybe more. Fire gutted it. Poor boy died. His uncle locked him in. Real tragedy." "There's no record of that," I whispered. She nodded, slow. "No, there wouldn't be. Private property. They kept it quiet." That night, I made the worst choice of my life. I waited until Anna was asleep, turned off every light, sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor with only the glow of my phone. The vent cover was just inches from me. My hands shook as I unscrewed it. The shaft was black, dusty, warm air whistling through from the ancient AC system. At first I saw nothing, just shadows. Then movement. A shift, faint but undeniable. A hand, small, pale, reaching upward, not grabbing, just stretching, searching. I dropped the screwdriver, slammed the vent shut, screwed it back with shaking fingers. My chest heaved like I'd been running. I didn't tell Anna, just told her the next morning we needed to leave. "Are you having another episode?" she asked, studying me like she was scared of the answer. Maybe I was, but I couldn't stay. 2 weeks later, we packed what we could and left for a studio closer to town. I didn't look back at Green Pine, not once. It's been years. Therapy helps. I'm stable now. I work in a bookstore. I have a boyfriend who teases me about triple-checking locks and refusing apartments with floor vents. Charcoal's still alive, still follows me room to room. But some nights in unfamiliar places, hotels, old apartments, I freeze when I hear footsteps above me, or worse, below me, because sometimes, just like then, I hear it again. A whisper deep in the walls crawling up from under the floorboards. Don't answer the door. Not all warnings come with sirens. Some slip into your ears in the dark. And the scariest things aren't always what knock. Sometimes it's what waits beneath your feet, quiet, patient, hoping you'll open the door, hoping you'll let it in. Some people run from a city, a memory, a neighborhood that won't stop pressing on old bruises. I ran from a person. After Paige left last December, I couldn't breathe in Chicago anymore. The apartment was too full of her absence, haunted, not by ghosts, but by the everyday habits we built together and then destroyed. Her chipped coffee mug still sitting in the sink, her coat hanging in the hallway like she'd be back any second to shrug into it, her perfume clinging faintly to the cushions. I'd catch myself listening for the front door, waiting for her to walk in and tell me I wasn't as unbearable as she'd sworn in those last bitter days. But she never came back. By March, I stopped waiting. I stuffed what was left of my life into the back of my Prius and drove until the city lights disappeared in the rear view. Cedar Falls, Iowa. That's where I ended up, after scrolling through endless listings. The place I found was called Briarfield Oaks, which made me laugh out loud when I read it. The name sounded like a retirement village that smelled of cough drops and lemon cleaner, where people played bingo under fluorescent lights. But the rent was low, the neighborhood quiet, and the tenants mostly older. Peaceful, forgettable. That's what I needed. Stillness. When I pulled into the parking lot, Tom, the building manager, was finishing a cigarette by the dumpster. Heavy-set guy, late 50s, permanent scowl carved into his face, work boots planted wide. He flicked his cigarette to the pavement and squinted at me. Second floor's yours, he said, jerking his thumb upward. Place above you's empty. Been that way a while. Supposed to get renovated, but materials keep getting delayed. Don't worry, you'll like it here. Quiet, folks. Good, I muttered, shifting the box in my arms. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And for the first 2 weeks, that's exactly what I got. Silence. I coded database tools for a mid-tier software firm during the day, then walked the neighborhood at night. The air tasted cleaner than Chicago's, crisp, sharp, like it hadn't been chewed over by millions of lungs before mine. I watched squirrels outsmart bird feeders, memorized the way the street lamps buzzed, and let the days pass without reminders of Paige. No shared memories clinging to the corners, no ghosts in the furniture. But by the start of the 3rd week, things changed. The first night it happened, I was microwaving leftover pasta. Nearly midnight. The apartment was hushed still, until I heard it, footsteps. Not the vague thud of pipes settling or neighbors shifting in their beds. These were heavy, deliberate steps, directly above me, pacing, forward, pause, back again, over and over. I killed the microwave and stood there listening, heart hammering. The sound stopped. The next morning I called Tom. Hey, sorry to bother you, but didn't you say nobody's in the unit upstairs? Still empty, he said after a pause. Why? I heard footsteps really clear around midnight. Pipes, he said too quickly. Building's old, you'll hear things sometimes. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But a few nights later, around 2 a.m., I woke to a dull thud above me. Dust sifted down from the ceiling fan, tiny flakes of plaster landing on the blanket. In the bathroom that morning, I caught something strange, a faint stain above the mirror. I climbed onto the sink to get a closer look. My stomach dropped. It was a footprint upside down. I told myself it wasn't real. I was exhausted. The nights still felt like Paige's absence was stitched into them, like grief itself had taken shape in the dark. Grief makes the brain cruel. It invents patterns, fills voids with shadows. That had to be it. Then came the storm. A hard wind howled against the windows, rattling the glass like it wanted in. Around 1:30, the power cut out, plunging the apartment into thick blackness. That's when I heard it. Crying. A woman's voice. Soft, steady, somewhere between a sob and a whisper. The sound bled through the ceiling. I lit a candle with shaking hands and held it high. The plaster overhead was intact, no cracks, no leaks. Yet the crying continued, low and endless. I panicked, threw on my coat and stepped outside. The wind was razor-sharp, tearing at my face. I stared up at the unit above mine. Black windows. No light, no movement. Just empty panes staring back at me like blind eyes. The next morning, I cornered Tom in the lobby. Look, I'm not trying to make trouble, but last night I heard crying. A woman crying. It was coming from the unit above me. Tom exhaled through his nose, irritated. I told you already. That place is empty. Nobody's up there. Then who's walking around every night? I shot back. He didn't answer, just muttered that he'd check it when he got around to it. Later that day, I came home to find a mug shattered on the kitchen floor. My favorite mug, the one I'd left safely on the counter that morning. I hadn't heard it fall, hadn't heard anything. It was just there, broken, scattered, as if it had leapt on its own. A few hours after the mug shattered, the bathroom mirror split. One clean crack straight down the middle, as if someone had dragged a blade across it. I hadn't slammed the door, hadn't even touched the glass. Just walked in, toothbrush in hand, and found my own reflection staring back at me in two jagged halves. That night I was finishing up some work emails when my laptop camera light blinked on. I froze. No calls, no meetings. Zoom wasn't even running. Yet the green dot glowed steady, accusing. My own face stared back at me on the black screen. Someone was watching. I snapped the laptop shut so hard the sound echoed through the room, then shoved it into the drawer of my desk like that could bury the fact of it. My hands shook for a long time after. I couldn't rationalize it anymore. Whatever this was, it wasn't pipes or old plaster or lack of sleep. Something was happening in that apartment, or inside it, or above it. And I was caught in the middle. The next day I bought a cheap sound recorder from a little electronics shop downtown. Small, plastic, the kind high school kids might use to bootleg lectures. I set it on my nightstand each night and let it run while I pretended to sleep. At first the playbacks were nothing. Creaks, distant knocks, the kind of harmless noises an old building makes when it shifts. Then the scratching started. Nails on wood, slow at first, then sharper, impatient. After that, voices, a muttering that rose and fell like someone whispering to themselves in the dark. I replayed the files 100 times, straining for words, but it was always just out of reach. And then one night the recorder caught something different. Not footsteps, not whispering. Crawling. Quick, skittering bursts, as though something with too many limbs was darting across hardwood. I took the recorder to Tom the next morning, shoved it onto his desk. "Listen," I said, hitting play. He didn't interrupt, didn't crack a joke, didn't accuse me of being tired or paranoid. He just sat there, his jaw tight, staring at the little machine like it might lunge at him. His eyes were red, bloodshot, wide in a way I hadn't seen before. The next day, when I came home, the door to the upstairs unit was strung with yellow caution tape. No explanation. I hadn't heard anyone hammer, hadn't heard voices, but there it was. Silent. Waiting. That night, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. The voice was low, mechanical, distorted like it had been fed through a broken speaker. Just one sentence. Urgent. Meant for me. Don't look at the ceiling. I dropped the phone onto the carpet and backed away like it might explode. I should have called someone then, police, family, anybody, but I didn't. Instead, I froze, sat on the living room floor with my back pressed to the couch, every light blazing, clutching a blanket like a child. I stayed like that for hours, listening to the apartment breathe. Around 5 a.m., something changed. The ceiling light above me flickered once, twice, then dimmed. I looked up. The ceiling was wet. Or it looked wet. Dark patches blooming outward in slow circles like condensation spreading through fabric. Then with a sharp sound, a crack split right down the center. Behind it, movement. Not a shape I could name, not a face, just the suggestion of something shifting in the crawl space above. Something aware. I ran. No bag, no jacket, just keys in my fist. I drove until I reached the edge of town, parked in a strip mall lot, and sat in the driver's seat until the sky turned pale with morning. My breath fogged the windows. My pulse didn't slow. By noon I forced myself back. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know where else to go. Tom met me in the hall, walked the unit with me, slow, silent. The ceiling was fine. No water damage, no cracks, no smell. Like nothing had ever happened. He studied me with that squint of his. "You under stress?" he asked finally. "You okay?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. That night, I didn't step inside. I curled up in the driver's seat of my Prius instead, engine idling, lights on in the apartment above me. I slept there, and the next night, and the night after that. On the fourth day, I found the article. 2010. A snowstorm knocked out power for several days. A woman in the upstairs unit went missing. No forced entry, no struggle. Family said she'd become withdrawn in the weeks before, complaining of pacing, whispers, sounds in the vents. She was never found. The apartment was never officially cleared. I didn't pack, didn't clean. I left most of my furniture where it stood and drove away without looking back. Tom never called, never asked. Maybe he understood. That was more than 2 years ago. Since then, I've moved 3 times. Different states, different cities. Every time I tour a new place, I ask one question before anything else. Is there a unit above this one? If the answer is yes, I leave. But it doesn't matter. I still hear it sometimes. In hotels, in old houses, even once in the guest room at my sister's. A faint scuttle in the ceiling, a soft tapping in the plaster. I tell myself it's nothing. I try to ignore it. But every now and then, just as I'm about to sleep, the air grows heavy. The stillness presses down, and I hear it again. Don't look at the ceiling. Some things don't stop when you move. Some things follow. Not because they want to hurt you, at least not at first, but because you ignored them. Because they've been waiting too long for someone to listen. And when something finally warns you not to look up, believe it. After the accident, I wasn't myself anymore. It wasn't just grief, it was the strange, unshakable fact of being alive when Jenna wasn't. She'd been driving that night, her hands tight on the wheel, and I was staring at my phone, scrolling through messages I can't even remember now. Then it happened. A blinding flare of headlights, ice under the tires, the world collapsing into the crunch of metal folding in on itself. She was gone instantly. I walked away with a fractured wrist, a few cuts and wounds no one could see. The guilt pressed into me like a second skin I couldn't peel off. Denver became unbearable. Every corner of that apartment was a graveyard of her absence. Her toothbrush still in the holder, her coffee mug left unwashed in the sink. I couldn't breathe in there. Couldn't stand how her ghost lingered in ordinary objects. One night, I shoved what I needed into 2 suitcases and drove until I reached a place that felt like nowhere. That's how I found Larkpur Hill, a mid-rise complex just outside Bozeman, Montana. The building stood on the edge of the forest, pine trees shadowing the lot. Hills stretched behind it, glazed with frost, while the wind sang a low, endless howl through the branches. The apartment was cheap, already furnished, and available immediately. 3rd floor. Quiet neighbors. No one beneath me. The unit downstairs is sealed, Miriam, the landlord, explained as she slid the keys into my hand. Her voice was calm, matter of fact. Water damage last spring. No one's been in there for months. Perfect, I muttered. And for a while, it really was. Days fell into a rhythm. I worked on illustrations for children's books, commissions that kept me afloat. Drank too much coffee, kept the lights dim, the curtains drawn. Outside, the snow piled high, muffling the world. No traffic, no voices, no reminders of the accident. Just silence, the one thing I thought I wanted. But about 3 weeks in, the silence started to crack. At first it was subtle, a dull knock from below at 3 in the morning, a dragging sound like heavy furniture scraping against hardwood. Then the vent in my hallway rattled faintly, as though something brushed against it from the other side. One night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly above me when I saw it. A faint flicker seeping through the cracks in the floorboards. A glow, not candlelight, not electric, but a dull orange shimmer. I pressed my ear to the floor. Rustling. A whispering voice. The cadence was wrong, broken, like someone chanting the same phrase over and over. The only words I could make out froze me cold. She stayed. She stayed too long. The next morning, with my coffee trembling in my hand, I walked down to Miriam's unit on the 1st floor. She answered in her usual fuzzy robe, hair mussed, blinking sleep from her eyes. "Sorry to bother you," I started, trying to sound casual. "It's just, I keep hearing noises at night. From the unit below." Her brow furrowed. "There's no one in that unit. You know that. Could someone have gotten in?" She shook her head firmly. "No. Power's cut off down there. I've got the only key. It's still water damaged. Harper, we haven't even—" "Right." I cut in, nodding too quickly. "Weird building sounds, maybe. Old pipes." That night, I set my phone to record. I placed it by the floor vent, left it running for 3 hours. In the morning, I played it back. My hand slipped, nearly dropping the phone. Whispers, scraping, nails. God, it sounded like nails tapping against metal. And then the voice. Female, faint. The same phrase, but changed. She stayed. She stayed too long, and now she can't leave. The lights in the hallway flickered. Later that night, I heard a soft thud outside my bedroom door. I froze. From under the crack, I saw them. Fingers. 4 of them. Curled. Motionless. As if someone crouched there waiting. They never knocked. The next day, a white van idled near the entrance, a plumber's logo painted on the side. I ran out, coat half-zipped, boots crunching the snow. "Are you working on the unit below 3B?" I asked, breath fogging in the cold. The man frowned. "We were called for a third-floor pipe burst, not second. No one's touched that unit in almost a year." The blood drained from my face. That night, I didn't dare sleep. I curled on the couch, knees drawn to my chest, every light blazing. At 2:20 a.m., the hallway bulb flickered once, twice, then went dark. I held my breath. At 2:37, the vent rattled, then went still, and then the voice, right behind the wall. "She's here now. She came back." I screamed and hurled the nearest book at the vent. Silence followed, but the words wouldn't leave me. They lodged deep, festering. Desperate, I searched the building's address online. Not much. An old rental listing, a zoning document. But buried in a cached article from November 2018, I found her. Sarah Linfield, children's author, lived in the unit directly below mine. She'd gone missing during a snowstorm. Her sister had filed the report. When police finally entered weeks later, they found the apartment abandoned. Mirrors shattered. Phrases written in red ink across every wall. She kept coming back. I stormed back to Miriam's door, phone in hand. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "You told me no one's been in that flat," I said, shoving the phone toward her. "But someone died there. You didn't tell me." Her face drained of color. She pulled me inside, shut the door. In the cramped kitchen, under the harsh light, she looked older, wearier. "I didn't lie," she whispered. "No one's been in there since. I didn't think it would affect the upstairs." "What happened to her?" My voice cracked. Miriam's gaze dropped. "She was grieving. Her sister died the year before. People said she talked to herself, that the apartment whispered to her. She claimed the walls held things, that something wouldn't let her go. Then one night," Miriam's voice faltered, "she just vanished. They don't know if it was suicide. No blood, no forced entry, just an empty apartment." I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against Miriam's kitchen tile. "I'm leaving," I said. "Harper," her voice cracked. "Sometimes grief echoes. You know that better than anyone." I didn't answer. I went upstairs, packed a single bag, shoved my tablet and sketchbook inside, and drove to Missoula that night. I left behind 2 weeks' rent, 3 houseplants, and my best winter coat. I didn't care. For weeks, I crashed on a friend's pull-out couch in a damp basement, her dog curling on my chest while I woke up crying in the dark. But I was breathing again, eating again. Eventually, I found a new apartment. Top floor, no neighbors above or below. Sunlight poured through the windows, and the floors didn't creak. No vents connected me to strangers. Still, some nights I lie awake and swear I hear it. The whisper that followed me through floorboards I no longer have. She stayed. She stayed too long. I know it isn't real anymore, but some part of me believes Jenna stayed behind. And maybe Sarah did too. Grief becomes a room you can't leave. It seeps into the quiet, seeps into the walls, makes you forget how to live outside of it. Healing means walking out, even when the wind bites and the road ahead looks empty. Some people stay too long in places meant only for the dead. The bravest thing you can do is leave before their echoes become your own. It's strange what you notice when your life caves in. After Devin and I ended things, 7 years, 1 apartment, 2 almost marriage licenses, I couldn't breathe in Portland. Every street corner reminded me of us. Every cafe, every busker's song scraped against my ribs. So I packed what I could into my beat-up Honda and drove south until the rain swallowed the road. By the time I reached Ashland, the downpour was relentless. I found Echo Pines through a flyer pinned to a laundromat board. The building looked forgotten, tucked behind moss-strangled oaks, its driveway cracked with weeds. The rent was suspiciously cheap. I didn't care. I needed a place where I didn't exist in anyone else's memory. My unit, 2B, was dated but livable. The one beside mine, 2A, was padlocked from the outside, windows painted over in thick green. I asked Dale, the landlord, while he handed me my keys. "No one in there," he said flatly. "Storage now. Been sealed since 2020. Pandemic thing." I nodded, oddly grateful for the silence. For the first few weeks, routine dulled the edges of my grief. Freelance design jobs, takeout cartons, long hours staring at rain-streaked glass. The isolation was numbing, predictable, what I thought I wanted. Until the cracks showed. At exactly 3:14 a.m., every night, a soft knock echoed through the wall between my kitchen and 2A. Always 3 slow taps. Then silence. I told myself it was plumbing, old wood shifting, until the smell of lavender drifted under the wall, faint but distinct, sometimes accompanied by the low whir of what sounded like a pencil sharpener. One night, half asleep, I pressed my ear against the kitchen wall. At first, nothing. Then came the scrape of chalk against tile, followed by a woman humming a lullaby. Sweet at first, then off-key, cracking apart like it had fallen out of rhythm with the world. I started recording audio journals, just voice memos on my phone, left running overnight. The mic pointed at the wall. I expected nothing, only proof that it was in my head. But on the 5th morning, when I hit play, my blood went cold. A woman's voice, brittle, whispering the same phrase again and again. "Not yet. Not yet." Still drawing. Followed by the sharp tapping of nails on glass. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. On the 3rd, I woke to find every frame on my gallery wall flipped upside down. Not one disturbed except the nail nearest to 2A's wall. That nail lay on my pillow. I texted Dale. "What's going on in 2A?" His reply didn't come for a day. "Still sealed. No one's in there." I didn't believe him. The last straw came a week later. I came home, groceries in hand, and found a pencil on my doormat. Short, bitten at both ends. Taped to it was a torn page from a sketchbook, the smooth ivory kind I knew too well. On it, in heavy graphite, was a drawing of me. My face, eyes wide, mouth open, frozen in the moment of realizing something too late. The lines were rushed, but skilled, familiar, even. I marched straight to Dale's door and pounded until he opened. "You need to tell me what's in 2A, I demanded. He studied me, then sighed. She was an artist. Callie. Lived there before the pandemic. Quiet type. Drew in the garden until it closed. Then one day she stopped answering calls. Last anyone saw her was at the art store. When cops forced the door, the walls were covered in sketches, hundreds of them, all of herself. Each one worse than the last, less human, more warped. They never found her, just the drawings. We locked it, left it. The green paint? That was hers, her last project. I packed that night. Left behind my printer, backup drives, even my desk. I didn't want anything that had touched that wall. I drove to my brother's place in Eugene, arriving at 3 in the morning. He didn't ask questions. Now I work from cafes, I live with people, I draw less. And when I do, I keep the lights blazing, music blasting. Still, sometimes when my pencil hovers over paper, I swear I hear it beneath the noise. The drag of lead too slow. A voice just under hearing range. "Not yet. Not yet." Still drawing. Sometimes the quiet places we run to for healing are already haunted. By memory, by grief, by those who stayed too long.